All right, I want to. I saw a couple of videos from another YouTuber, which prompted me to make this video. Plus, also, it was I wanted to talk about this too. Simply, let me bring this a little bit closer. Um, I wanted to talk about this as well, simply because I've also saw this kind of in the chat when I do the live streams. Um, and so it's the premise of the title of the video, which I don't want to be very long on this. And it's kind of like the question would be, is my gear good enough? And I'm going to say the only time your gear is not good enough is when you're trying to do something and you don't have what you need to do it. That's about it. Or the only time your gear isn't good enough when it's not doing the job that you want to do as good as you want it to do it. Other than that, that's the time when it's kind of like, okay, I bought something and it's okay, but I'm still not getting the results. Either I don't have what I need, or I need to upgrade to something better. That's it. I don't want anyone to think that if you don't have an API or Neve or SSL or whatever, or you don't have these certain types of compressors or reverbs or EQs or whatever, that your stuff isn't good enough. There's certain gear that's designed to do certain things well. Some people believe there are people that are biased. For example, I'll say this: they're stuck in certain genres of music, and they think everyone should be in that genre of music, and that is not true. And the tools they need for certain genres of music isn't required for other types of music. But they, in their mind, it's kind of like if you got a person and they record rock bands. Okay, well, ideally, to record a rock band is to be in a commercial type of recording studio with the control room, a separate live room, and you're gonna record, you're gonna mic up guitar cabinets and things like that in the live room. You might have some separators, what we call gobos or whatever. You might have some separators or whatever, or the guitar cabinets may be in certain rooms that are mic'd or whatever. And they seem to think, because they record rock music that way, that everyone, let's say they have a large analog console. I don't care if it's a Cadec or Neotech, or, it could be a whatever, a Neve or an API, an SSL, whatever. And they have all this outboard gear or whatever. So they think that because they're recording rock bands and they like rock music, and they're recording in this so and for that's what is required, and that is not true at all for someone who needs. If they're a person if they're using virtual instruments, and I'm talking about software, I'm talking about programs like Analog Lab 5 or Contact, or programs like that, where you buy the software and you get, like, for example, Synth Anthology, you get 150 different synthesizers, and they get, they have all the patches from different keyboards. There's drums in there, there's drum kits, there is bass guitars, synth basses, electric pianos, organ sounds, guitars, string sounds, horn sounds, sax sounds, all these different varieties, all these different synthesizer sounds, synth pads and so forth. And they make sound naturally, right? You have a committee controller, and you can control all those sounds, and you're going to record those virtual instruments into a DAW, you know, Pro Tools, Logic, whatever. You do not need an API or Neve console for that. You don't need to have. You might need an maybe just a simple 2-channel interface just to capture, because you're going to record vocals maybe. And maybe even the interface may already have built-on mic pre's already in it. You know, we get so caught up with mic pre's. For me, I just don't. I think the most interfaces mic pre's are just too clean. They have no color to them. They're plain sounding to me. And I need something that makes your vocal sound bigger, warmer, more analogish, more bigger. That's why I have racks of I have stacks of interface preamps for that very reason. And a lot of those preamps are very affordable. Like, you can get the Tone Beast. I have the Tone Beast Edition 2, which is the black one. Those are run about $400 or $500. And you got your options to go from between steel and nickel type of transformers and everything else to really saturate this preamp sound. But other than that, you're golden. So if a person is doing EDM or hip hop, or let's say a person they're into hip hop and they're using all the sounds and samples and drum pads and sounds from excuse me, the MPC software. Like, I have an MPC Renaissance. You do not need excuse me. You do not need this big, gigantic, lavish commercial studio for that. Your sounds are being recorded. They're directly into the software. They're directly into it. You just got to make sure that when you are mixing it, you're recording it, you're getting the right levels. If you need to use some, compressors or whatever, even plug-in compressors, you just want to make sure it's going to sound right. And sometimes the room, the acoustics and the treatment and all that, and speaker placement and all this stuff will matter for that. That's going to be the case for any genre of music. So, but if you do a certain type of music, you only need what you need. I would tell anyone, don't ever get caught up, because there are people even on my live stream chat that would make people. There's some people that try to feel like what they have is inferior, and that's not true. The only time your stuff is inferior when it's not getting the results. And sometimes, a lot of times when people are not getting the results, is because they don't have enough experience to get the results they need. For example, you might have a person. I've seen people do recordings and mixes, and I'll see they don't have their mixing console in their DAW setup properly. There's no auxiliaries, there's no buses. They got reverb units on channels, and I'm like, and they got the reverb unit, they don't even have that set up right. They got the pre-delay wrong, they got the decay wrong, they got the diffusion set wrong, and it's a lot of things I've seen. But that's usually can be the issue to why sometimes stuff doesn't sound right, because they don't have an experience. A lot of people get into this, they've never worked in a actual real recording studio. I've been in several recording studios, so I know the process. So to end the video, the only time your gear is not good enough when you're not getting the results, or you just don't have what you need. Then you might say, okay, well, I need to, I'm not getting the vocals to give that fullness like I want, and I'm using an interface preamp. Well, let me go get an external preamp, maybe like an ISA1 or something like that, or Let me go get an external rack mount type of preamp to see if that's going to help. That's when you do that. Or I only have a 2-channel preamp, but I'm trying to record 8 sources at a time. Well, naturally, that 2-channel audio interface is not going to be good enough because it doesn't have enough channels. I need to upgrade to an interface that has 8 channels. That sort of deal. Or if I got 8 channels, maybe I need an additional 8 channels. So I need to go get one that maybe I can slave one to another so I can get 16 channels out of it. That's when you decide, okay, I need to upgrade my studio. You buy what you need. Don't buy because someone is trying to make you feel like your stuff is inferior. I don't care if you got I've done mixes on Behringer True. I don't have the Behringer Trues here, they're downstairs. I've done a lot of mixes and recordings with those Behringer Trues. Those are perfectly capable, really good sounding studio. But some people will always criticize, oh, those are Behringers. I get so tired of proving people that it's not. There's always gonna be people that's gonna not. You're not gonna convince people about Behringer. There's gonna be people that's gonna like it. There's gonna be people that just, because some people follow. Some people necessarily never even use Behringer. They've heard all the bad stories or whatever. Then there are people that have had bad experiences with Behringer stuff. And I'm like this. I've made a video on Behringer stuff. I've said some of their stuff is subpar, and a lot of stuff that they have is really, really good. It's hit or miss with Behringer stuff. I would only recommend stuff that I know that works by Behringer. There's gear that works well by Behringer. Like for one, their Behringer True, the B2031As are really good studio monitors. They're well built. They're a solid sounding studio monitor. The only really issue that a lot of people would have with those is the tweeter would go out and found out there's a very, very inexpensive fix to that. You can actually buy a new tweeter and the actual chip that controls it for under $30, and maybe 30 minutes worth of work, and your speakers is back up to par. Things like that. But other than that, I'm just going to say this. Yes. This thing gets really, 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 what's the best word the best way I can describe it when it comes to gear? Yes, having the most expensive high-end gear for your recording studio is nice. But I would tell anyone, you should not feel inferior because you don't have that gear. I don't even have, like me, I have an Allen & Heath console here. I don't have a Neve or an SSL or an API console. Would I like to have one? Yes. I like, the Neve VR consoles. And some of those are actually within price range now. Years ago, consoles like that were way out of price range. But then there are people on the channel that don't even want a console. They're like, well, I don't need a console. They're just, they're too big, they're heavy, they're maintenance nightmares. I just don't need one. For me, I like working on a console because I like that type of workflow. It's how I like to work. Do I need a console? No. I don't have to have a console. But I prefer this workflow because I like this workflow. And there are lots of people that like working on a console. They like that workflow. But do I feel inferior because I don't have a Neve because I have my Allen & Heath? I've already proved that you can make a great sounding record with my Allen and Heath. People that watch my channel heard it. They like, oh man, yes, you can. So I don't feel inferior because I don't have a Neve console or an SSL or an API. Whatever the case may be, I don't. So I don't want people that watch the channel make you should feel fair because you have an audience interface, or it's kind of like, well, some people say it was easy because you got an Antelope, which is the $3,200, well, it was $3,200 audio interface. And I'm using like the Behringer Euphoria, or I'm using a Focusrite or whatever. That that Behringer Euphoria or that Focusrite or the Audient or the M-Audio audio interfaces are more than capable to get the job done. Once again, it really varies on what genre of music that you're going to record. If you're doing it for yourself, or you're going to do it for, I want to open up a studio that's going to cater to clients. Well, if you know that you're going to open up a studio and you want to record clients, then yes, you're probably going to want to lean more towards building your recording studio, like having gear and a console like I have in this room here, because it's going to make the workflow a lot more efficient when it comes to multi-tracking, especially if you want to start doing more than just bands. You might want to do a small piece, or 24 piece, 30 piece orchestra. I can do a 30 piece orchestra on this console because it's a 48 channel console. It's got 48 mic pre's in it. And that's what you're looking at. Do I want to have a wide range of different types of compressors and wide ranges of, EQs and things like that for choices that I'm going to use for different gear on different situations when I'm multi-tracking and recording different. That's what. But if I'm just sitting there and I'm using, I'm going to record I'm going to use some electronic music. I'm going to use the virtual instruments that come like in the Core collection as an example, and use all those instruments that come in Core, the drum sounds, the synth sounds, the string sounds, all that's coming that software. And I'm going to multi-track that into my DAW using those sounds that's already in my computer. I don't need to run it through a console. I don't need to run it through preamps or nothing like that. The sounds, they're already in your computer. You just need your audio interface to hear, maybe coming through your monitors or whatever, your headphones or whatever. But the sounds are already there. You just track one. I'm going to use this synth drum sound from the Triton plugin. I'm going to use that as my drum. That's on track 1. The snare is going to be on track 2. Hi-hat's on track 3. Toms, maybe tracks 4, 5, and 6. Maybe hi-hat crashes on 7 and 8 or whatever. And that's going to be, all those tracks are going to be my drum sounds in the DAW. The VST instruments already on your hard drive. You just go and select it for those channels, for those tracks. And then I'm going to use the synth bass from that same instrument on track 9. I maybe use some EP, electric piano sounds, track 10 and 11, and maybe some other 12 and 13, maybe some other, whatever, 14, maybe some string sounds, 15 and 16, maybe a synth lead sound, and then maybe 7 and 8, maybe your vocals. So the vocals, I'm going to need to be able to record my vocals. Maybe I use the preamp on my audio interface, or I might route an external preamp that's going to go through my interface into the DAW. Get captured in my DAW. After that, I'm ready to set up, make sure my mixer's set up. Okay, I'm going to add in some bus tracks. I'm going to make sure I add in some auxiliary tracks. That's where all my reverbs and delays going to be on my auxiliaries. My bus tracks is, so I can bus all my drums into a drum bus, keyboards into a keyboard bus, all my vocals, background vocals into a vocal bus, and all that. And then that way I can put all my compressors and processing on those bus tracks, and all that's going to route to the main master bus. And because I'm recording, I'm using the DAW's mixer. I don't, you know, whatever the case. And then I can mix it, you know, and so forth that way. Use the automation in the DAW and everything else. You don't need a console or any external gear for any of that. Except for maybe a preamp for the vocals. Use your microphone, you know, and a choice of microphone and, you know, sources like that is going to be captured into the DAW. Maybe a tube preamp or whatever the case may be. So that's going to do it for this video. I don't want anyone to ever think that your gear isn't good enough. Your gear is only not good enough when it's not doing what you need it to do. You know, in other words, I need to do some upgrading. I'm not getting whatever. I need to either upgrade or I don't have enough, you know, tools. So I need to get some other stuff to get the job done. That's it. You know, some people get caught up into, well, it's only good if it's only on an SSL 6000 console. And that's absolutely false. Because there's going to be, it gets into, you start pulling hairs when you start using solid state electronics versus, you know, like SSL consoles don't have transformers in it. You know, it's all solid state with op amps and stuff like that versus an API or MCI or a Neve console actually has transformers in it. You know, and you start getting these harmonic distortion and you start getting even and odd order harmonics. You know, that's saturating the sound, you know, that what makes a Neve console or an API sound like it sound compared to a solid state. Solid states tend to sound a little bit more cleaner. They don't have so it's almost like but anyhow, what is the reason why they're called solid state? Solid state, it's not like two transformer, you know, they use more like transistor op amp type of circuitry compared to two transformer or even transformer op amp input and output transformer sounds. It gets really deep into why a Neve sound like a sound or an API sound like a sound or a SSL or an MCI, Helios, and so forth. Like my Allen Heath doesn't have transformers in it. So that's going to do it for this video. I just want to stress that out, that don't ever feel that your gear, if you're getting great results doing what you're doing with the gear that you have and you're doing what you're doing, you're perfectly fine. There are going to be people that I would never make anyone think that they feel inferior because you don't have API 312 preamps or Neve 1070. You should never ever feel inferior because you have like a Persona Studio Channel preamp. Like that Persona Studio Channel preamp isn't good enough. Yeah, it is. If it's doing the job that you need to do well and capture the essence of what you're doing well, and it's, you know, everything's, yeah, then you're perfectly fine. Other than that, that's gonna do it. Y'all have a great one.